The main event is the tribunal hearing, how it's unfolded, the cases that have been argued, how the verdict was reached and the immediate reactions, what it means to football, both right now and into the future. And Jace, that's where we might start, because every level of participant in the industry has had their say, and it has split legends, it's split Hall of Fame members, it's split former players, and it's split modern commentators. You are in all of those categories, it would seem to me. Where do you sit as we head towards this tribunal hearing?
Well, it's probably the night of the week I'm most looking forward to see exactly how it's interpreted. My greatest concern is that we are asking too much of the players. We're asking them to make all these decisions. So what do we expect in this instance David Mackay to do? She's coming from a little further away, so it looks like he might be going harder or might be going faster, but he's desperate to get there, and they get there simultaneously, as far as I'm concerned. It's not like a lot of other cases where you see a player, oh, I'm not going to quite get there, so I drop my hip and shoulder into him. He's actually reaching for the ball as they make that contact. So I really question what we would expect of him. Do you sit there and say, well, I'm coming from further away, I'm going quicker, but about 5 metres away I've got to make a decision. Am I going to get there in time? If not, do I pull up? I don't think we can ask the players to do that. I know we're doing absolutely everything we possibly can to avoid head contact, but I just think if there's two guys with their eyes on the ball, both legitimately going for the football, regardless of where they've come or how they've got there, as long as they haven't done it in an unfair manner, what do we expect them to do? So I think the question that comes out of it, Gerard, is there such a thing left in our game as incidental contact?
So that very much goes on trial tomorrow night. So the wording of the charge will be unreasonable in the circumstances. Yep. To your eye, is there anything unreasonable in David Mackay's approach to the ball and the man?
No, because I think he's come from further away. So it looks like he's coming tearing in, but he does that to get there at the same time. Do we expect him to put the brakes on?
So the second part of what will be asked tomorrow night is, was there an alternative, a reasonable alternative for him to take as he approached that contest?
There's always an alternative, Gerard. That's to slow down and let the other bloke get the ball. But if we get to the point where we're starting to ask players to do that, I think the game's lost.
Does Mackay owe Hunter Clark any duty of care as he hurdles in?
That's like saying, am I not allowed to come from further away? Because you didn't have to run as quick. I'm the one with all the pace. But I needed that pace to get there at the same time so I could compete for the footy. We've got to allow players to approach the football from wherever they might be on the ground to get there to make an honest contest. He does that. He's literally reaching for the ball. They're both sort of semi-side on, which is what we want them to do, not to go head on. I just don't know what the alternative is that we're asking David Mackay to do in that instance. If
you were on this panel tomorrow night, there'll be three of your brethren, yep, three former players. Would you be aware of the magnitude of the decision separate to the isolated incident, as it were? Would you be cognisant that this actually would be a precedent that hasn't been instilled in the game previously?
I hope they are, because that's exactly what they're doing. There will be a precedent to come out of this, and it will be about your ability to approach the contest, even though you're 100% solely committed at contesting the footy, eyes on the football, getting there at the same time, and then we're going to add another layer of saying you've still got a duty of care. Gee, that worries me. I'd be really concerned if we get to that point. So I'm in the camp of hoping he gets off,
yep,
but I really hope we get some clarification over how you're allowed to approach the footy.
So do you think it's the place... So there'll be a procedural issue tomorrow night. Do you think it's the place of the tribunal to make this ruling which effectively alters the laws of the game, or do you think this is actually the domain of the AFL at the end of the season if it wants to make an adjustment to write an adjustment into the laws of the game?
I think it's the AFL that needs to come out and make a statement based on what transpires tomorrow night. So whether at what point in time they do that, I'm not one for waiting until the end of the season. If there's something you need to address, just address it. But let me ask you a question. So if that same collision happened and it was David Mackay that had the broken jaw and Hunter Clark was fine, any discussion at all?
I don't think so. It's the velocity with which Mackay is approaching the contest. So he is entirely in control of the nature and force of the contact.
But he's already
Hunter
there.
Clark.
Well, he's in the vicinity. whereas Mackay's coming from further
That's
away.
right. So
they still get there at the same time.
It's all on Mackay's actions how this pans out. So the question is everything he did reasonable? Was he 100% the ball, or was he cleaning the player out to get to the ball as well in that rugby kind of way?
I think there's one angle there that shows a terrific view of him actually reaching in with his hands at the same time that he's making contact. So I will be disappointed if he gets rubbed out, but that's okay if that's where we want to go. And if that's where they want to take the game and say, you have to actually sit here and factor more in than just a fair contest at the ball. If you're coming from further away or you've built up speed that you think might lead to a decent contest, you now have to factor that into your thinking. Well, OK, but come out and say that. Come out and say it so that we're all aware of it. But don't sit there and pick a contest like that and say, no, you went too hard and the other bloke got injured, so you're the one that gets rubbed out.
Do you think in your time covering the game, we will get to a point where we will know that that's a suspension if a player causes that sort of damage attacking the ball, or do you feel like the principle you're applying now will last infinitum?
I hope we don't get to that point. I don't think this happens that often in the game.
Yep.
But there has to be a facility that allows us to be desperate to get there to compete for the footy. And if you can't show desperation to get to the footy, something in the game will be lost. And I think Mackay showed desperation to get there and get to a 50-50 ball because no one had control of it. And he just had to use serious speed and aggression to get there, Gerard. But I hope we don't take that out of the game. I know we don't want anyone getting hurt, and it's terrible what's happened to Hunter Clark. And we're doing everything we possibly can to stop head contact, to stop injuries. But there has to be some degree of incidental contact in the game.
Yep. Am
I getting an argument from you?
No, I think that's a snapshot of half of what we'll see tomorrow night. And the other half, I think, will be more interesting than the result.
Yeah.
What will the AFL argue that, A, Mackay did wrong, and B, what his alternative was? And that will actually instruct us as to what the future looks like.
So if I said to you to answer those two questions, what would you come up with?
I would say to you there was an alternative, that was not to cannon into Hunter Clark. So he has to make his calculations on his way to the ball as to how that's going to pan out.
So how is he going to go for the ball without making any contact?
Well, Simon Goodwin told us on Monday night that there are moments where you have to accept that you are the tackler as you arrive.
OK.
And that you will lay the tackle as soon as Hunter Clark's got the ball. You are there and tackling him because you've come in a manner that observes a duty of care not to hit him in the head.
I agree, but the other bloke hasn't got the ball yet, so I can't tackle him.
Yep. So I suspect that's the alternative that will be offered tomorrow night, and that's ahead of its time.
Yep.
So I don't think we're there yet. I fully expect a not guilty verdict tomorrow night, but it will be instructional to see how it unfolds.
Yep.
And I think there is a time where we will regard that approach to the contest and to the player as unreasonable. I don't think we're there yet. But I do believe in my time covering the game that that's where we will go.
OK.
So we'll see. We'll be here tomorrow night to document it as it happens.